Maybe you've also heard some things that you absolutely have to do to plant your feet properly. Tomatoes. So we put a good handful of nettles at the bottom of the hole. For the tomato plant, we remove the lower leaves. And then we're going to bury it nice and deep so that the stem is buried as well. There you go. Now you'll see these tomato plants produce. And have you ever wondered if by any chance maybe some of this knowledge wasn't actually that useful or even sometimes totally counterproductive? In this new episode of my series, which I called Useless Tip, I'm questioning some old practices and other popular beliefs that we keep repeating today without knowing if it's really effective or not. Today we'll explore planting a garden classic, the tomato, and question two common beliefs. Namely, that you should put a good handful of nettles at the bottom of the planting hole, and that when you plant the tomato plant, you should bury a good part of its stem. And you will see that, in fact, not only is it not really useful to do this, but on top of that, one of these two practices can even pose a risk to your crop. All right, let's get started. The first thing we're going to look at is putting a handful of crushed nettles at the bottom of the planting hole before placing the tomato plant on top. That's something we hear about very often. Nettles are high in nitrogen, so this would greatly boost growth and would produce more vigorous tomato plants, etc. I heard that the very first year I settled here, 15 years ago, since I like testing things, I first planted 2 rows of tomatoes. One row had nettles at the hole's bottom, the other row did not. And for the rest, for both rows, I did the same thing and I didn't see any significant difference between the 2 rows. Well, so if it works, it's not obvious. A quick note on nature. Organic matter, like dead leaves from plants and trees, falls onto the soil's surface. This organic matter will gradually decompose and produce nutrients for the plants, which the rain will carry down into the soil. Also, the plants will develop roots that grow below the soil surface. By the way, when drawing a tree with roots, we should stop drawing the roots. A bit like a tree that would grow upside down, vertically under the ground, the roots grow horizontally just beneath the surface of the soil. Right where the nutrients from the decomposition of organic matter are going to be carried away by the rain. Their food essentially falls from the sky. What do you think will happen if we use some organic matter? A handful of nettles that we're going to put under the tomato plant that we're going to plant. So on top, you see where this is going, right? It doesn't make sense, does it? Every time we water, all the nutrients produced by this organic matter will be carried downward while the tomato roots are above. And that's not great. For the tomato plant, it won't make any difference. So if you want to add organic matter that really benefits the tomato, plant your tomato normally and put that handful of nettles on the surface of the soil. I say nettles, but it could be any organic matter. That's why when I plant tomatoes or anything else, I always add compost and organic matter to the soil surface. Putting nettles at the bottom of the hole before planting tomatoes is ineffective at best. It's better to place them on top after planting. At worst, it can be counterproductive for your crop. That's why I mentioned at the start of the video that something could even threaten the crop. Imagine putting a large handful of nettles in the ground and planting your tomato root right in it. It's fresh organic matter that's going to ferment, heat up and release a big surplus of nitrogen, which your tomato isn't able to absorb because it doesn't yet have the root system for it. And as a result, all of that could burn your tomato plant if you put in too much and plant your tomato directly in it right away. Putting nettles under a tomato plant does nothing at best and may harm the plant at worst. I'm not leaving you with just that. You're nice. So here's a tip that might work. There's still an interesting way to do things. Let me show you. About 2 weeks before it's time to plant, you can already start picking a good amount of nettles. I pick them without gloves because I prefer it. With practice, it doesn't bother me. Yes, ouch, damn. About 2 weeks before planting time, you can start picking a good amount of nettles that you will be able to put at the bottom of the hole. At your tomato planting spot, you will loosen the soil where the tomato's roots will grow. And there you will be able to put a good handful of nettles for each tomato plant. You'll mix this with your soil in the planting area, right? And you're going to leave it like that for at least 2 weeks. You don't do this when you're planting, so that when you plant, the nettles will have already started to decompose well and it won't cause any problems, and it will provide a good nitrogen boost at the beginning of the tomato plant's growth. This could be interesting, especially since it's not May yet and there's still a risk of frost. In fact, it's freezing here right now. So I'm going to wait at least 2 weeks before planting them in the ground. All right. The second thing we often hear about is removing the lower leaves from the tomato plant. Here's another one. And when you plant it, to bury it deep, to bury the bottom of the stem, well, I'm not going to tell you that it's useless. That being said, it doesn't necessarily serve the purpose that everyone might think. Besides, I do it too every time I repot my tomato plant. I always plant it deeper than before, burying it as deep as possible. By the way, I regularly make posts where I talk about it. I made one not long ago. And in the comments I got, I had some comments, including one from someone who told me, I know someone who did that, who tried it. For several crops, some tomato plants were buried deep, while others were planted at normal depth after sprouting. As a result, midsummer yields for both plants were identical, with neither being more productive or vigorous. So yes, planting your tomato plants deeper will not in the end give you plants that are more vigorous and more productive. But that's not when it matters, it's much earlier. If you plant a tomato with well-developed foliage like this, and a small root system since it must fit in the pot, if grown naturally in open ground, the root system would be larger and more balanced. Here, it's imbalanced. The balanced plant can evaporate much water through its still large foliage. On the other hand, with its small root system, it can absorb less than what it could evaporate. There's an imbalance. Even with well-developed roots in a pot, you still need to water often. First, remove the lower leaves. That will slightly reduce the foliage and the plant's ability to evaporate water. The second tip is that tomatoes have a rather unique characteristic. They are able to produce quickly. They grow lots of roots on all parts of the stems that will be buried. In fact, on many plants, look at the base of the stems. And you can clearly see that there are little growths, like small bumps appearing on the stem. Those are roots that are ready to sprout, so to speak. Once the stem is buried, the plant can quickly grow more roots. So by removing the lower leaves and planting the stem, we'll move from a plant with lots of foliage that can evaporate much water, but has a small root system and not the ability to absorb enough, to a plant that will have much less foliage, less evaporation capacity, but on the other hand, more roots and therefore the ability to absorb plenty of water. So right from the first periods after planting, they will require much less watering, but that's not all. When you plant them deeper, you will immediately place the root deeper than if you had planted it just at this height. And we'll lower it slightly so the roots will be in soil that takes longer to dry out. We plant them in spring when the soil is moist and water well at planting. I've already made videos on planting. We water well when planting, then don't need to water again. In summer, the soil will dry out more and more deeply. But the area where the root will be from the beginning will stay moist much longer. From the start, we'll have a plant needing less water since its root system matches its leaf volume. And watering will need to be less frequent, or maybe not needed at all. Because if we water well when planting, as I explained, there's no need to water anymore. At least until summer, you might need to water then. So all of this will bring big advantages. But these advantages will mostly be at the beginning of the cultivation. You could do none of this. Plant your tomato plant normally, water a lot, water often. And once the tomato plant is well developed and has produced plenty of roots, some of which will have gone quite deep, then you won't need to water much anymore. And then it will work as if you had used the technique we just saw. Removing the leaves to plant deeper offers a big early advantage, but only at first. Well, there might be another small difference. Planting deeper and immediately giving the plant more vigor could make the plants grow a little faster. And so slightly earlier yields, but to be honest, I'm not sure I believe that. I'm not going to test it. I will test it. And if some of you want to try doing that, comparing plants planted at different depths, but with identical conditions and varieties. And then you'll see if it produces earlier by planting deeper or not at all. Don't forget to share your results in the comments. I'm very interested. All right, and now happy planting. Check the weather. Be careful, there's still a risk of frost. That's it. See you in the next video. Thanks. Subscribe, share, comment, like, support on TP. I can do better there. As usual, thank you for watching until now. If you enjoyed it, you can share the video with others and subscribe to my channel. A thumbs up is appreciated and helps the algorithm. And as usual, this channel is supported by all the tippers who have been following me for a while, without whom I wouldn't be able to take the time to do all this. So if you want to join this community and support me as well, there's a link over there. Top right, in the description below, or at the end of the video. If you search, you'll find it. Thanks to everyone who does. Happy planting, good luck with the frost, and have a great spring when it finally arrives. Alright, bye. I'm not done yet. Now I just need to dig it up before it freezes. We'll give them another poll. Sorry, it was for YouTube. You don't care about it. You're not making things any better.